Okay, so welcome to everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the Council Budget and Finance Committee to order, and let the record reflect that that all members of the committee, Council Member Mayor Pro Tem Lamnen and Council Member Wahab are present as myself, and we will proceed with public comments. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to make a public comment? Anyone? Whoops. We don't have any attendees. Although anyone who is a panelist can also make a public comment, but seeing no one, I will close public comment, and we'll go to item number 1, which is approval of the minutes of the March 16th meeting. Committee members, any comments, questions, motions?
I'll move the item.
Okay.
A second.
All right. The item has been moved and seconded by Council Members Wahab and Lamnen. I will join them in voting aye on the motion. And you can deem the minutes approved by unanimous vote. And we will now move to item number 2, which is the Public Bank East Bay Viability Study. We're going to have a presentation by Public Bank East Bay, and I don't think there wasn't any other late report on that or anything, was there?
I believe, Mayor, that there was some information sent out this afternoon, but I think Dudikis or George could probably speak to that.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's all right. Is it all right if we begin?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Great. Okay, so just for some context, I know it's been maybe 1 or 2 months since we last presented. When we came before this committee, we were seeking support for the project of creating a public bank in the East Bay. We have a resolution included as part of the agenda packet, I believe. The comments that we received from the committee were to report back to all of you once our viability study had been published. And so we're excited to report that that viability study has indeed been published. And we're going to give a brief presentation on a high-level summary of that viability study before opening it up to questions and comments, with the hope of ideally moving this before council and creating a resolution in support of this project to the supervisors and publicly as well. I just want to clarify that there has been some conversation about what the implications would be if Hayward were to join Public Bank East Bay as a founding city. This discussion tonight is specifically about the resolution and the progress of the viability study. If council deems it worthy to support and pass this resolution, then we would revisit that conversation about making Hayward a founding agency. So I just wanted to draw that distinction. Tonight's conversation is specifically about the viability study and the resolution that we've presented as part of the agenda packet. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing screen. I'm going to be joined by Debbie and Didikis, who are both board members of Friends of the Public Bank East Bay, the 501c3 nonprofit that we all represent. And I will be doing the first half of the presentation and then handing it off to Debbie for the second half. So I just want to make sure you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
It's blank white, right?
One moment. Let me try this.
Yeah, I could see that. Right.
Okay. And can everyone see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, yep. Fantastic. So as we mentioned, Friends of the Public Bank East Bay, our goal is to create a public bank within the East Bay. I'm hoping the slide is changing over. There, okay, it's probably going to jump. Just for some context and as a refresher, a public bank is a financial institution owned by public entities such as a city, county, or region instead of private shareholders. What it does is it leverages its equity to make low-cost loans and provide credit, liquidity, and financial services to local financial institutions. It's a lot of financial jargon, but put simply, we would provide extra capital to local institutions like credit unions, community banks and CDFIs, providing them with more capital to begin work on projects and hopefully providing lower interest rates to those projects that are seeking that capital. Most importantly, a public bank reinvests its profits back into the community. Right now, what we see is private banks take those profits and push those profits along to private shareholders. Our hope is that the profits that come from our investments within our own community get reallocated back to a public bank and then redistributed again, creating a closed loop within our city, our region, our county, and creating a sustainable and vibrant local economy as a result. So we're driven by 5 core values: equity, social responsibility. Of course, we're a bank, so fiscal responsibility is paramount, accountability, and democracy. Our high-level goals as a project is to support equitable economic development in the region, manage and invest municipal funds safely and cost-effectively, divest public funds from Wall Street banks, and harness public funds to invest in public goals. The note about divestment from Wall Street banks is especially important. I know that Hayward, like many cities, has very progressive goals around fighting against climate change, and it's really difficult when our tax dollars are being held in private banks that then make investments in fossil fuel pipelines, for example. So there's a certain degree of agency that we don't have with our own tax dollars, despite the progressive policies that our city council may be pushing forward. So it really gives us a level of control and agency over our own public dollars. We're incredibly proud to talk about some of the folks that we're working with on this project. Recently, our viability study was authored by Tom Seguros. I will save you the trouble of having to hear me read it, but the experience is on the screen. Tom Seguros helped us put together our viability study in consultation with Gary Findley, who is a banking attorney and has helped start over 200 banks. Gary Findley is the person that we have contracted with to write our business plan. So just to help outline the timeline, we have a viability study. Once the viability study is approved by the founding agencies, we begin work on a business plan. That business plan is what is used for our charter application to actually open up a public bank within the East Bay. So we're incredibly excited to have Gary Findley on board as the main champion of our business plan. And recently, this happened within the last few months, we brought on the retired CEO of the Bank of North Dakota. The Bank of North Dakota is the only operating public bank in the entire United States. And we're incredibly excited to have him on board serving as an independent consultant to help us, help guide us through the process of actually creating this institution within the East Bay. For the bank itself, we've been actively recruiting candidates for the board. The governance structure that we have in mind will be outlined on the next slide, but what we're looking to have is representatives from each of the founding agencies, as well as representatives that are representative of the diverse East Bay community, but also representative of the different interests that we believe a public bank could help address, such as affordable housing, small business loans, green energy, and so on and so forth. And so you can see we have a great roster here. If you're interested in learning more about the candidates we currently have, you can visit publicbankeastbay.org. And there's a list on the website of all of our candidates we've currently recruited. Community finance, of course, is incredibly important as well. And lastly, a reminder of what our model is. We've broken it down into 3 sections: funding, lending, and oversight. As of now, the model that we're proposing is a public bank that's owned and capitalized by Alameda County and the cities of Oakland, Berkeley, and Richmond. We will start by taking only municipal deposits from cities, counties, and semi-governmental or special district agencies like BART or EdMUD. We will partner with local financial institutions to make mission-driven loans. We are a heavily regulated institution. In order for us to receive our charter, we have to pass both the state and federal regulators. And like I mentioned on the previous slide, we will be governed by an independent board of directors with a mix of community representatives and city and county officials, along with financial experts. So that's a high-level overview of the public banking project, a little bit of the process and some of the folks that we're working with. I'm going to hand it over to Debbie Notkin to discuss our viability study.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think we sent you a link to the viability study. It's 50 pages long, and very few people have time to read it. But it's that long because it is rigorous and clear and explains a lot of the questions that may come up. So I would encourage you to go look at it for whatever questions you might have. And of course, we're also happy to answer questions here. The viability study sets out 4 initial tasks for the bank, but even before that, it talks about taking $40 million, roughly $40 million in capital from the founding agencies and building that into a mission-aligned lending portfolio of $250 million in the first 10 years. We expect to be able to support eligible borrowers, which includes small businesses, green energy conversion people, and affordable housing developers with flexible loans and lines of credit at 2 to 4%. We would leverage, this says only 1 to 2% of available cash and investments of participating governments, but actually it's come out to much less than that when we calculate it. We're talking about if Hayward were to participate, it would be roughly 0.5% to 0.75% of the available cash and investments in the city. We project that the bank will reach profitability in year 3 and start returning competitive returns on investments while growing slowly and sustainably. George?
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, without thinking much about Hayward at this point, we anticipate $40 million from the initial 4 agencies, and that is very much proportional. Hank Levy, Henry Levy, whom most of you probably know as Alameda County's treasurer, is willing to say very publicly that he knows the vast bulk of this has to come from the county because he knows how much more money the county has than the cities. And then the potential for growth includes other cities and counties, either as additional founding members or as early contributors and adopters. One of the liabilities that really will benefit both the cities and the bank is local governments can purchase or refinance short-term bonds at lower rates. The investments grow from 100,000 to 200 or 250,000 in year 10. And then we might see additional growth through deposits from special district government agencies such as BART and the Water District, and or nonprofits such as foundations who have similar interests to cities in getting their money out of the Wall Street banks and the fossil fuel industry. So we started with 4 tasks because you don't want to jump into a public bank and say we're going to do everything all at once. That's a route to failure. So we're looking at affordable housing, and we did a lot of research, and particularly the thing that affordable housing developers need is the initial short-term financing for the pre-development. And then we're also looking at lending to land trusts, accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, and other non-standard structures that big banks tend to not understand and not be favorable to. We're looking at a business making small loans to small businesses, local small businesses, particularly BIPOC and other marginalized small business owners. We would do this with CDFIs or community banks. We would build out a secondary market for microloans. We did some research with the Bay Area Association of Black-owned businesses, and many of those businesses want loans in numbers that banks can't even think about. But microlending is established, and there isn't any reason why our bank couldn't work with that. And then we would act as a public face and referral agency for mission-oriented lenders, helping connect mission-oriented people small businesses who need money to the lenders who can help them. The green energy green mitigation is such a huge area. And so what we focused on was electrifying existing buildings with solar panels and batteries. And we would finance that possibly through partnership with public utilities, possibly with partnership through contractors who do it. And this project could easily work with the Affordable Housing Project to take existing housing and turn it into green, affordable housing for people who need it now. And then the final leg of the initial bank plan is to finance and refinance municipal bonds and start to underwrite its own bonds. And that, I think, will be of enormous interest to the city of Hayward, wherever and whenever the city decides to come into the public bank. So this is the example of what I was just talking about with the bonds. We didn't have a Hayward bond immediately available, so we used a Richmond bond. This is a bond that had a $29 million principal and a 4 to 4.73% interest rate. It seems very likely from our research that Hayward has bonds that look a lot like this. If the Public Bank of the East Bay were to refinance this bond at 3%, it would reduce the interest payments by $500,000 over the first 5 years and by over $6 million over its lifetime. That recovers an initial capital investment of $1.5 million within the first 3 years. And meanwhile, it also provides a profitability center to the bank while it's building up those other lending processes. And on the long term, I intentionally left this blank. We intentionally left this blank because we know that your treasurer and your city administrator could pretty easily do the math to fill it in, specifically for Hayward. And this is our timeline. It's optimistic, but not crazy. And it winds up opening the bank just a little over 12 months from now, which is kind of exciting.
I'll leave it here for just a moment. Okay.
So we're asking the Budget and Finance Committee to forward this resolution to the full council in Hayward. It would establish the city of Hayward's interest in the bank and recommend to the Alameda County Board of Supervisors that the county move forward with supporting and capitalizing the bank because, again, given the county's disproportionate economic heft, without the county, this would be much, much harder lift.
I think that brings us to the end of the presentation.
And with that, we're very happy to take your questions and comments.
Okay, thank you. I know I have some council members. Yes, Sarah, Mayor Pro Tem Lamnon.
And also Sarah Works.
And also Sarah, yeah.
So thank you. I really am happy to see you all again, and excited to have seen this project move from this thing that wouldn't it be great to have to this place that has a state sort of structure, legislation behind it, to now a viability study and then eventually a business plan. So, as we go along, I think I'm starting to understand better the mechanics of it, which was where my questions were last time. In concept, I'm very supportive. In logistics, I just didn't understand it. And so I think I'm starting to grasp that. Thank you, Debbie, for information, and for George as well. And so, the letter that you shared, I am fine with if we want to move forward as a city. The resolution gave me some pause, partly because it discloses where our finances are. And also, with this effort, I think there could be an opportunity for it to not just be, frankly, a North County effort, as many things are. No offense to North County, but both Hayward and Fremont are bigger than Berkeley, and we often see East County being left out of equations. And so the opportunity to really explore, well, what is the mechanism for another jurisdiction to participate? Personally, I'm very interested in that. And, obviously I can't commit Hayward myself to anything. And I know we haven't done enough of the understanding of the logistics in terms of, okay, if the city commits $500, $1 million to be a founding member, what does that actually mean? What does that do for our finances? What does that do for our liquidity? What are the benefits? What are the risks? All of that. And so, we haven't had that conversation yet. But I hope that we can have that conversation to at least understand it and then potentially move forward.
Well, let
Not
me
just for us, but for other cities as well.
let me just say that we're very interested in representing the whole county, and not just because of Alameda County, but because I think it's not uncommon that Oakland and Berkeley sort of stand in for Alameda County in inappropriate and inaccurate ways. And I say this as a resident of Oakland.
Then I'll say it as resident of Hayward. So
exactly. And so we're very interested in including the county. We're very interested in the unincorporated areas, which of course, by definition, are not part of Hayward, but are close to you geographically and impact your city in different ways. And we are discussing with Gary Finley, our banking attorney, the kind of detailed mechanisms that you're talking about. And if the Hayward Full Council passes this resolution, as George said, we're happy to have further talks with you about how that would work.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
And I just want to give a little bit of additional context before we move forward. With the different councils we've been working with in Berkeley, Richmond, and Oakland, Tom Seguros, who helped us develop the viability study, and Gary Finley, who we've hired for our business plan, have been in close contact with the finance directors of those different cities, having a back and forth. And once the viability study is approved, we imagine that back and forth to increase, because the business plan is really what nails down the nuts and bolts of the bank itself. And so it requires collaboration between the author of the business plan and every finance department of the agencies involved.
Yeah, the county treasurer, who is an ally of ours, asked Gary Finley, what's the difference between the viability study and the business plan? And Gary's answer was the viability study has 3 pages of financials, and the business plan will have 200 pages of financials. So that should give you an idea of the difference in scale.
Yeah. And I mentioned this in an email to you, Councilmember Lambton, but for the rest of the mayor, the Councilmember Wahab, and staff, Richmond did pass the viability study recently. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yes.
And at such time as you might require it, Dustin and Kelly, if you needed to talk to the people that are writing all these things, we can make that available so you can talk to them at that level. Instead of just, we're in broad terms, they're in the very minutia of it. And anybody else, the council members, if they wanted to be put to sleep, invested in that, that's always a possibility too.
I appreciate that. I think as we hear more from the council, those conversations and kind of the direction of the council, I think Dustin and I would be happy to engage in that.
Great.
Okay. Aisha.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Glad that things are moving along. I would be fully supportive of this moving to the full council with hopefully the full adoption of this resolution. Obviously, language in the resolution can be adjusted to fit the needs of the city. So I'm happy with that. I would recommend working with our finance director as much as possible, I personally would like to see the city of Hayward be one of the founding members as well. That is an intention that I have. And, again, I really appreciate that you guys have moved this along and, have other folks signing up as well. But I think the conversation I had 2 years ago with some of you guys was that hopefully we can open it up in Hayward in a small little office if we can and see what happens. So really appreciative of this. So thank you.
Okay. You didn't have any real questions there, right?
Do you guys need a motion to move this to the second? The full council, or?
Well, yeah, we will. We will get to that. Whether we want to actually do that. But I appreciate your comments. I'm still thinking about some questions though. So did you have any that?
I didn't have any questions because this is literally just the seed stage, and I think they covered a lot of it already in previous conversations as well.
Yeah. So, first of all, I want to go back to Sarah. And what was it that you had concerns about in, I believe it's the letter here that we would be asked to send to the supervisors?
The letter, I think, is fine. The resolution speaks about where the city's assets currently sit. And I'm just not sure that's something we would want to have publicly.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
I think there's ways to just.
I'm under the impression that that's public information, but I'm happy to be corrected.
I'm sure it is, for hence you wouldn't have it to put into this draft resolution. So that's not my issue. It's just I feel like it may draw focus from where the I didn't, without hearing where my colleagues were, I didn't want to spend a ton of time doing wordsmithing, but I may have some ideas about that. So just a suggestion. Happy to be overruled about that. But I just thinking to shift it a little more to Hayward and kind of the language of we may want to be a player in this as well, because that's not in there yet either.
And so when you're, the assets that are banked with J.P. Morgan Chase, I mean, those are not all. I mean, those are not our actual assets. That's our checking account, right? That's our. Dustin, could you explain that? What assets they're talking about here?
So they are
in many places, but
they are our, it's all part of the city's cash pool essentially, which is made up of all both cash, investment tools, LAIF holdings, all of those things. One of which is our accounts at JP Morgan. So it's not just the general fund; it's all funds across the city. Some of which are highly restricted, some more than others. Certainly the general fund, but it's not all what's the word? Discretionary type of assets.
All right. So that would be something that we really would want to understand. I mean, but when you mention the LAIF fund, we're not talking about that, right? We're not talking about that being part of, we would still have those investments that we have in.
Correct. No, I was simply speaking towards, the world of assets that we have.
The LAIF is completely separate from what we're doing.
And, we have an investment policy, so we would want to examine that and, and make sure that we're, that we're holding to it.
Once again, Oakland and Richmond have modified their investment policy to include the ability to invest in public banks. And we believe Berkeley will too when it passes the viability study. So that is something that would probably have to happen in Hayward, because when the investment policies were written, this was only a dream in three people's eyes or North Dakota's eyes or something.
Yes, and sorry to jump in, but I did want to say that was one of the things that I do hope we look at in the future as well. Thanks.
Okay. So there was the mention of the word leverage and the funds that are leveraged in an early slide. Could you just explain that a little more?
Sure. That's something that banks can do that nobody else can do, right? Like if you've heard about revolving loan funds or CDFIs or even credit unions, they're all limited to only loaning funds they have on hand. But banks with FDIC insurance, which the public bank would have to have, and with other kinds of regulatory oversight, are legally allowed and in fact encouraged to lend a multiple of the funds they have on hand. So if the bank starts with 40 million in capitalization, which is our current working number, we could lend theoretically up to as much as 400 million. And then as it comes back in, you can lend it out again. And that's what is described as leverage in the banking world. And every bank, from your small community banks to your giant banks, all do that, working with the Federal Reserve.
I mean, there are great risks to that. I am very interested. I don't want you to think that I am not looking at this with a really, there are a lot of benefits, as you have pointed out, but we also are stewards of, taxpayer funds and have to provide services to the city of Hayward, and a catastrophic loss would be catastrophic.
No, absolutely. And I'm a very big believer in wanting to have deep, complex, if you look at the viability study, there's a lot of risk analysis in it. In the business plan, there will be a great deal more. We understand that this is public money. We don't want anybody to jump in without their eyes open. I see Didicus and George both nodding. And please remember that what we're talking about is 0.5% of Hayward's operating budget, right? 0.5% to 0.75%. So I would never deny that there is risk. And then I guess the other thing to say is the State Department of Financial Protection and Innovation and the FDIC watch new banks like hawks. You can't do anything without them looking over your shoulder. And again, I think that's a good thing.
Where are you with the county? I mean, you have the treasurer is of Alameda County is a supporter of this, but he doesn't have. I mean, obviously the Board of Supervisors have the decision making as far as so. At what stage are you with the county in terms of their interest and their likelihood of backing this?
I think that's a difficult question to answer well. The county, as you know, is in flux. The death of Supervisor Chan changed the makeup of the board. We believe we have county support for this, but the supervisors are moving slowly, and we are choosing not to hurry them too much because we want to make sure that their concerns are directly addressed. And having the support of the county treasurer is probably the best way to win the supervisors to our point of view. The State Association of County Treasurers calls this bank Hank's Bank.
What kind of I don't even know. I don't know that I could describe our economy right now. I mean, some people say it's booming. Other people say it's busting. We've got inflation worries, but we've also got good earnings, I think. And, the unemployment is relatively low. I mean, there are a lot of mixed components of the economy right now. And there are a lot of things going on that will have an effect on our economy, the war in Ukraine being among them, and emerging from COVID. But the economy is what it is. And is there a timing? Does the current state of the economy at the time you would start this up make a difference in starting it up?
I think the answer to that is almost the same as the question. It's mixed, right? If we start at a relatively low point in the economy, then interest rates are low, and that can be to a bank's advantage. If we start when the economy is stronger, then there is more economic activity and more churn, and that can be to a bank's advantage. We like to think that we are flexible and supple enough to start when we're ready and be prepared for whatever comes. And that's why the CEO and the people on the bank directors board are so terribly, terribly important.
And finally, some of the things that we have talked about in the past in terms of participating in something like this, or our interest, is some of that was prompted by the situation with the cannabis being legal in the state. The city of Hayward has authorized it, and we have just one operating right now. Plan to have two more. And other businesses. And we wanted to, and, the whole thing about cash had been a problem in terms of us, agreeing to get into this, although that has not been, I don't know if that's still a problem, but so that's what, that situation about, cannabis money and whether a public bank started by government agencies would be able to accept deposits from cannabis businesses. But also, I think the other thing is we know we have a lot of, not only low income people who are treated badly by the payday loan, business model, and also people who may, for whatever, who may not be documented, or and be nervous about or not even able to open accounts and have checking accounts in regular banks. So does is a public bank bound by some of those same rules, and would we not be able to actually address some of those situations of giving people a low cost checking account? The loans are problematic because you still I'm not hearing you say that people who receive or entities who receive loans would not be thoroughly vetted, and they would be, right? Sure. Not just going to give money so I don't know. So can you speak to whether some of those issues that we have found that would make us want to help support such a bank could be addressed by the bank?
I'll start, and I hope George and Didicus will jump in. Regarding cannabis banking has gotten much easier when Colorado and Washington legalized recreational cannabis. There started being small banks who figured out how to do it. And we talked about that a few years ago. We've basically pulled away from it as a public banking model. Regarding the undocumented and the unbanked, that's not something we would do directly. But I commend to you the work of Dan Liebson at Community Development Finance in Oakland, who is working with Fong La in the county to open another branch in the unincorporated areas. And he has the country's only nonprofit check cashing company, and he's on our board. He's a candidate for our board. So we're very interested in where we can fit in supporting that. And so
it could be something that a public bank might do, not as a profit making. They would have other, but as a public service somewhat.
Well, I think it can be a money-making operation for a nonprofit, but it's sort of something we would support, we would not do directly. And then the third pillar of that is that California passed in 2021 a law called the Public Banking Option Act, which is not the one about local public banks, but is about free checking accounts for all Californians. And that's currently they're putting together a blue ribbon commission to define that more clearly. So there's a bunch of things going on in that area, and we certainly would want to support it.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd like to add to that is just using the Bank of North Dakota as an example. There are more local financial institutions per capita in the bank in North Dakota because of that public bank's existence. And so in terms of just providing underserved communities with access to more financial resources, a public bank in the East Bay would create the conditions for more credit unions or community banks or CDFIs to exist and thrive and be able to provide business to those underserved communities. So as Debbie mentioned, we wouldn't be providing those services directly, but we would be enabling those services to be created and provided in the region that we serve.
Is it still true that the North Dakota is the only one actually operating at this point? Only other?
There are a couple sort of gray area small ones, but it's basically true.
Yeah. I can't think of, and my husband is from North Dakota. I have traveled extensively in North Dakota, and I can't think of two more different places. Well, maybe I could, but still, North Dakota is a very, very different place from Alameda County.
Absolutely. But some of the principles apply. Not investing in subprime loans would have helped Alameda County too. Being able to refinance student loans at lower rates would be of an enormous benefit to Alameda County. The places are different, but some of the needs are the same. I thought Didicus wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, actually, George said what I wanted to say, because the key word here, Mara, is enabling. And that if we can enable a lot of these ideas that you touched on to happen, that moves all of this whole thing to exponentially higher. And that's what is the big obstacle right now, is that a lot of these small banks, they've even told us, like, well, we can't do that. Well, what if you had a public bank behind you? Oh, that's a different game. And that's the enabling that we can do. They're already doing checking accounts. If we can enable them to do the checking accounts to the unbanked peoples and the people that don't have a checking account so they can get out of payday, then that's what one of our focuses and what we'd like to do. Being a service that doesn't exist is prime with the public bank and the whole concept of public banking. And our mentor in North Dakota, that's one of their main features too, that they say for 100 years, they've enabled these things to happen. And that's why the new small banks have come into North Dakota, not just because the big banks don't have much of an interest in a place that has a population smaller than the East Bay. But so there's a real reasoning there, and there's real support there that can be beneficial, especially to certain parts of Hayward and certain sectors of our economy.
So really what you're asking right now is for a resolution and a letter to the county supervisors to support their, being a part of this.
Yes, exactly.
And not committing Hayward to anything at
Precisely.
This point, other than our interest in
Precisely.
participating as well. And
it would also commit us to moving forward with the kinds of things that Councilmember Lamnon wants to discuss. So.
Okay. And I see Aisha. I'm sorry, you have your hand up, so go ahead.
Definitely. I think Kelly had her hand up before me, but I think she got tired of putting it up.
No, the mayor actually asked my questions, which was about the banking for the unbanked and then the cannabis industry. So she was intuiting my question about that.
Okay, awesome.
At least when we've heard from other council members, banking services for our undocumented community and our unbanked has been a high priority.
Yeah. So I personally, I heard all the questions that our mayor asked and the relevant questions, but at the same time, I think one of the biggest problems in our industry, if you will, is the lack of options, right? I think that public banking is a great viable option. It diversifies a lot of things for a lot of people, including the city. And there's a lot of loans, specifically construction loans, for example, are being for single family development is being reduced significantly. I'm not sure if you guys have paid attention to that in the news, and multifamily complexes and things like that have increased significantly as well. So I think public banking can fill that void and fill that gap for a lot of different areas. And with cannabis, we're seeing it at the federal level that potentially it may go through, it may not go through. Does that lift everything? I'm still very fully supportive of this effort, and I'm happy to make the motion to move this.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion?
Sure.
Okay. And I just want to add that in thinking this through, we've talked also a lot about recently about wanting an opportunity for first-time home buyer loans, to easier access for people for first-time home buyer loans as an equity issue, really, as well. And so I think that is, I realize that's like the other things I mentioned, something that, we would want to see this bank, being a supporter of in a judicious way, in a safe way, but a source of money for such a thing to help people get into the housing ownership market, and as you've talked about, also small businesses. So, I think that if it in its idealized form would be something that would be a very good fit with our community and our values. I'm very, we all should be very nervous and I haven't asked the finance director to weigh in at this point, but certainly he's free to do that. But at this stage, we're not committing anything more than saying, county, look at this. We would like to see you support this and give it a good chance of getting launched. So I can support that motion. And I'm not saying that I'm just saying that I just am very nervous about taxpayer, our city money and protecting our money, because we are not, we are not rolling in it, and we have our own financial issues. But we are also, on the other side, we are also not on the verge of bankruptcy in any way, or insolvency, and I think we're doing reasonably well for the community that we are in the times that we're living in. But nevertheless, I'm always nervous about investing, and the riskier the investment, the more nervous I am. So, but you have put together, you really, since we first started meeting and hearing about this, I am really impressed with what you have put together and the presentation that you've made, and the people that you have on board. So I can support this step, certainly. So with that, unless there's anyone else who wants to say anything, we will thank you all for bringing this to us. And the first step here is the committee has now moved this forward to the whole council to consider. Kelly, do you want to talk about, the timing of that, or,
we'll obviously have to prepare a staff report and for the resolution. So my guess is probably towards the end of May, if that works from a timing perspective. It would be my suspicion. Since Dustin and his team will be preparing that staff report and resolution, and they're in the throes of
we're in budget
document right now.
We tried to get in under the budget wire, and we failed, and we know that.
So what, as far as the county goes, are you aware of any timing of any kind of vote that they would be taking?
We don't have timing for the county yet, but.
Well, if you don't have it yet, then I bet our timetable is just fine, because
your timetable is just fine.
Yeah. Okay.
So as far as next steps for our group, is there anything more that you need from us, or will we be in contact with the finance department?
I'll leave staff to answer that.
Yeah, we'll be in contact, George.
Okay, great. And I also just want to say for the record that Dustin Didicus and I did not plan on matching tonight. It just happened to be that way.
I got the email. I don't know about you.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh, look at that. Really? It's checkered shirt day?
Yeah,
It's national. Ask Francisco. It's National Checkered Shirt Day.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Sorry, we didn't get the word, but I don't know that I have one. Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you for your diligence, your work, your persistence. And, we may see this, probably not before my time in office ends, but
thank you for your time. And Mayor, thank you for your nervousness.
Oh,
So, and thank you especially to Dustin and Chrissy for their efforts in making this come through too. We appreciate their work
very much. So.
well, you have really come a long way with it, and so let's see where it goes.
Wonderful.
Start of something big.
That's right. I'm thrilled.
Song title, I think. We could write a song about it. All right. Thank you all for being here, and we look forward to further, further discussions and progress.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. So that brings us to a much more boring subject, but city tax generating revenue review and discussion.
Great. So I will be leading this conversation. I've got a short presentation, and certainly want to get some feedback from the committee. I've got here we go, presentation there. Can everyone see my screen yet?
Yes.
Great. So, obviously we've been sort of high level mentioning this each time that we've had a conversation about the future agenda items. And so, it started out as just a discussion of a potential parcel tax based on some of the results in the survey that we saw the last time that we did the community engagement survey. So we, based on the feedback that we received from the committee, we pivoted a bit and brought back what we thought that we heard. You probably saw that in the staff report. We wanted to give the committee an idea of the sort of universe of taxes, if you will, that the city either receives or collects, because there is quite a difference. The city, receives property sales and real property transfer tax that's remitted by either the state or the county. The city collects utility users tax, transient occupancy tax, cannabis tax, and not listed here, but business license tax as well. And so this is sort of the universe of taxes as we look at it. As we'll see kind of in the coming slides here, tax revenue is our number 1, 2, 3 revenue sources, with property tax being the highest and sales tax. Actually, I take that back. If we include Measure C, sales tax is, I believe, higher than property tax at this point. Also wanted to give the committee an idea of, the measures that we've had on recent ballots, and if they expire, when they expire. Obviously, the bottom 3 here are increase to the real property transfer tax, the cannabis tax, and the TOT have no expiration date. But the Measure C, we know sunsets in December of 2034, and we know that the utility users tax was extended, but only extended until June of 2039. Certainly, I don't mean to diminish the length of time that we have left on either of those, but certainly it is important for us to know that there is a sunset date on those, and we can't just continue to count on them into perpetuity unless voters were to vote again in support of either extending or removing a sunset date from those taxes. This slide gives an idea of the magnitude or dollar amounts that are generated annually by the taxes. Obviously, property is there at the top. Sales tax, both what we call the general fund and Measure C. We all know that Measure C, the sales tax, is actually a general tax, could be used for general fund purposes, should that be the will of the council, the city's intention, all of those things. We're also all aware of the promises that were made to the Hayward voters that we've stuck to very, very diligently. And so we've also been tracking those in a separate fund. As the committee knows, we'll be bringing back a report next month at this committee to discuss Measure C, future uses, potential, what our outstanding liabilities and potential use of funds moving forward. Obviously we spend a lot of time talking about utility users tax. We're all familiar that recently, we went back to the voters with Measure T to ask them to increase our ability to increase the rate for real property transfer tax. TOT, as you can see, took a major hit due to the pandemic. We still have not seen, probably not news to anyone on this call, still haven't seen a recovery in that. And I don't think that travel is nearly back to the normal that we had. And probably not surprising to anyone on this call either. Most of the travel that we had in Hayward were business travelers, and business travel has certainly been reduced to levels that are even lower than those that we saw those that we've seen for recover more for people taking leisure trips and traveling for pleasure. So the last that I want to mention is cannabis tax. Obviously, we didn't see much for a while, even after we had the voters had approved the tax and we had the ability to tax. Not surprisingly, given we didn't really have many businesses operating legally and providing cannabis in the community. Now that we do, we're seeing an uptick, and I would expect that as we get more through the entitlement process and more businesses are able to open, that we'll see a slight uptick here. I don't know that we will see, we certainly won't see a jump like we did from $3,000 to $440. I wouldn't expect that type of growth moving forward, although I would happily invite it. I think we're probably looking at between 500 and 750,000 a year. I would be happily surprised if we saw 1 million, there's potential for that. So obviously want to keep our eye on that and track it. I know we've committed to, providing essentially 1/7 of that tax back to the community. And so we'll be tracking that as well to make sure that we make good on that promise. As I mentioned, we did do some polling in the fall of 2021, talking about parcel tax. Much to my surprise, it did receive over 50, at both levels. It did receive over 50% support. A parcel tax that the city would essentially use the funds to either sustain or create new services for homeless people experiencing homelessness, mental health response, etc. You can see the $2 amounts that were polled. Obviously this changes with the economy as does anything else. And this was just sort of to gauge if the city were to consider something like this, it consider its viability and sort of guide us if it's worth continued work, or if it's something we're not even interested in. But certainly wanted to provide that, all of the above information to the committee to have a conversation, certainly understand better where our revenue is coming from, and receive some guidance from the committee if there are other taxes that you would like us to explore, or those sorts of things, just to kind of guide us as we continue our work around this, the city's number one revenue. So happy to answer any questions or anything you all would like to discuss.
Okay. Aisha.
Thank you. Overall, I do appreciate this. I think I was the first to say that I'm not necessarily interested in doing another tax on residents this go round, if you will. But I do want to highlight that, it's almost been, when did the last cannabis organization open? 2020, correct?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost 2 years, right? And we did change the ordinance in July of this past year. I want to say June or July. And with that change in the ordinance, we potentially did allow for non-storefront businesses to potentially take place. And then the 2 businesses that also have a permit that have not opened, I genuinely think that we need to do something about that. The guy who bought, I'm going to call it the Crab Shack, that Crab Shack on the corner that's like
the fish,
terrible. Yes, it's
Hayward Fishery is what the old timer Hayward people talk about.
Yeah. So that on that corner, there was a lot of hoopla when he presented, and I was really reluctant to even, grant that particular permit as to, I'm going to fix it up. I'm going to make it beautiful. I'm going to do all this other fun stuff. And this is why we okayed it. That has not taken place. So there hasn't even been an inch of movement
There
in some
has
of these.
there has been some.
Very limited in 2 years.
People say they took the building down, but they really, and I was thinking, well, they weren't supposed to do that, but no, they only took that like patio part that, that they had said they would take down, but that would indicate they are moving, don't you? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
not in 2 years, right? So when did that really take place? People are able to build multifamily complexes in less than 2 years at this point, right? So for one little unit, with the full support of council, with an industry that makes millions of dollars of interest and so forth, I find it very questionable. And I think that people are trying to wait and sit and sell their permits. So I really, really want to highlight this as a caution or we need to touch them again to see what's going on. I'm glad that the other cannabis industry is, or businesses kind of generating some revenue. Hopefully that the rest can as well. And then I also just want to prioritize some of the things that in these measures to increase the taxes, it was stated, for example, after school program or tutoring or something like that, as well as public safety, as well as a number of other things. The languages, as I've stated in the previous meeting, is very similar to one another over 5 of these ballot measures. So I just want to prioritize that. But I think that the overall, do you believe that our tax revenue, if you will, is sufficient for the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? When do you think that we need to revisit this and potentially escalate additional revenue?
I think it's something that we should keep a close eye on at all times. Mm-hmm. Obviously it's our number, it's our number 1, 2, 3, 4. It is our revenue. So we have to continue to analyze, look at potential opportunities. We know that our expenditure budget is going to grow. We can't control our revenues. All right. We can't say you will give me X in property tax. We can't control our expenditures. Right. And so essentially we need to obviously be able to sustain our expenditures and do so by bringing in revenues. If we are looking to, expand services, add new services, those sorts of things, we're going to have to find ways to continue to fund those. We've done a pretty good job of balancing our budget in years past, in recent history. And so we have done a good job of I would say we've managed the delicate balance of creating enough revenue, finding appropriate revenue sources, going to the ballot with measures that are supported and make a difference for the city's budget. But on the other side, we've also done a great job of controlling expenditures. And so, it's looking at if there are services that we are not providing today that we need to start providing tomorrow, we need to start looking at how we're going to fund that. And so that's when it really, starts to gain momentum, I'd say.
So I think the biggest concern that I would have is more infrastructure. And I know that sometimes, we talk about impact fees, things like that. I know a couple of years back, I know I spoke to Kelly about kind of some of the other fees out there for just roadway improvements and that type of infrastructure. So taking a look at potentially progressive tax measures on some of these corporations that are trying to come in. I know we had Amazon for a moment looking at coming into Hayward, and there is no value add to the city, right? So being able to kind of understand that there are a lot of industries trying to move into Hayward, especially moving out of San Francisco and into Hayward. That is actually a growing trend that we are seeing. And seeing if that there is something we can do there rather than average residents. Because I think that one, with the traffic, with people coming in for their jobs, for their businesses, and sales and so forth, I think that there's a lot of opportunity there without harming the general residencies, if you will. So that's something that I would like to keep an eye on. and then also language in the ballot measures of up to, right? So one of our ballot measures, we say that we are going to potentially raise taxes up to a certain percentage rather than making it a concrete and having to go back to the ballot year over year. So those are just my comments on this, but I do appreciate the analysis and the overview. Thank you. And also if we can kind of just have a headline as to the tax revenue that will expire. So let's say 5 years left, 8 years left, whatever years left. If we could just highlight that so it's like top of mind as we see it every single time in staff reports and so forth. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, it probably is reflected to some extent in longer range. I mean, well, the sunset dates, 2034 is closer than it seemed when we first passed it. So Sarah.
Thank you. Maybe in the financial projections is where that gets flagged. I don't know. Anyway, so I appreciate this report and discussion. Certainly we need more revenue. That's not a secret. I do think it's the wrong time to go for a general tax measure. This poll was taken even before the current inflation bump. So I think we lose credibility with folks if we go right now. But I am interested in taxes that might move things forward on some other issues. I know, like in an ideal world, I'd love to do something with just properties that are over $900,000 or $800,000 and really tax those. I realize the return on that is probably not enough to make it administratively worth our time. But I'm wondering about, are there, I think some jurisdictions may be looking at taxes on properties that are bought from outside the US or that are bought by investment groups, which I realize probably is not a huge revenue generator for us, but I'm wondering if it helps solve some of the housing affordability issue. So if there's bandwidth to look at this, I'm seeing your not so sure, Kelly, kind of comments.
No, I mean, I think, we've heard from the council that, this is not the time, but in that conversation, when we brought the resident satisfaction survey to the council, there was a desire to, just have the budget and finance committee look at our taxes and just kind of make sure we've covered the bases and is there anything that we're missing? And so I would say that this community has been incredibly generous, has opened their pocketbooks and checkbooks multiple times to support the city, to support city services. I think we are fortunate because we have done some of the hard taxes first, utility user tax, real property transfer tax, and a lot of other cities go for the TOT first because it's easy because everyone wants to tax hotels, but it doesn't really generate a lot of revenue. And so I think that was a lot of foresight on prior council's parts to go for those hard tax measures first. And so I think it's really positioned as well. But again, if the council wants to expand services, if we want to, we're doing okay with this, kind of balance, keeping our budget balanced with the services that we're providing, controlling expenditures. But I think as we continue to move down the path, and if we want to expand the homelessness services, if the state funding goes away, if the county funding goes away, and we will have to find other ways to fund those. So I think we're just presenting different options. I think, staff is kind of the mindset we've got a lot on our plates, and it's great if the council is supportive of not doing a tax measure this year. It would be a lot of legwork, and I think just given the transitions that are happening with the mayor's race and those kinds of things, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to do a tax measure on this ballot. So I think we're not asking you to give us direction to do anything. I think we're just kind of providing the information as the council had asked us to do. So.
Yeah, no, I fully appreciate that. And what I'm talking about is really kind of evolving policy potentially, not necessarily a ballot measure right now, but as you are in finance director meetings, as you're in city manager meetings, as you're in mayor meetings, I think people are starting to look at this issue of limiting speculative investment. And so I just thought, well, maybe that's a tax issue, maybe it's a policy issue. Let me just flag it. And if there become opportunities to be able to do that, I think while it's not a huge revenue generator, I think there are other benefits that may make it worth spending some energy on.
Absolutely look at that. And that might be something interesting, at a state policy level or legislative level to also look at is, is there a way to charge fee recovery for, absentee landlords or, out of country investments, so could we structure it as a fee as opposed to having to put a tax on it? And is there a legislative? So I think, I know, you've all served, several of you have served on the Revenue and Taxation Committee, and Dustin is serving on the city manager's sales tax working group through the league right now. He just got appointed to that, which is great. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for that networking and conversation around some of those policy issues. Great. And that sort of keys into my last point, was just kind of tooling what we have, right? So congratulations, Dustin. And, I thought I saw in the staff report that our UUT, that somehow insurance companies are exempt. Is that something that we can look at? I don't know how many we have in the city. And then the last one is even, as we have the Measure C conversation, I know the inclination has been, okay, what other things on the wish list could we take care of? At some point, I think we also have to ask, do we actually put that money into general fund to actually continue what we've already paid for? It's not as sexy or as fun, but it might be part of how we get that remaining red stuff off the ledger. So, thanks.
All right. Well, I think from what I've heard, I agree with my colleagues that this is probably not the time to move forward on this fall on a parcel tax. I was just curious, though, as to do you have an estimate on how much? I don't remember it being how much that might.
It was in the. Let me click on the link in the staff report to this, because I think in the survey when we worded the question, I think it's like $7 or $8 million a year.
Yeah, 8 rings a bell, but I don't want to give you. We can get you that.
No, I just.
While we're talking about the next topic, I'll go click on the agenda and find it. We've had a tax on every election since 2014. And it might be time to pause. And I would point out as well, having just passed Income Tax Day, that I think the deduction, the limit that Trump put in, ironically, and I support taxes, I support public spending, but and supposedly the Republicans are against that. And yet, the one thing Trump did that really, really affected me was raise my taxes by the limit on state and local tax deductions. And that's hit, I'm sure, a lot of people in this community because of, because of the high cost of living and housing in California, and that, we and taxes too. And we're a state that takes care, tries to, not always, it doesn't always come through, but, we certainly tax our residents enough to take care, and we take care of a lot of things and do a lot of things for people that other states that have very low taxes do not do. And it is, it's really very annoying when we get to this point of, I'm realizing that I am paying a lot more to the federal government because California is a state that, has a high tax load that it does a lot with. And, I'm not disputing that. But anyway, just realizing that and asking people, and it's a little, and we can't, we would have to make it a general tax and not, say we're going to only use it for these things.
And I think people do want to see those issues responded to. This isn't the time, but it's something we should keep in mind at some point. And
the information, Mayor. So I think we were thinking 8 million was what we wanted to try to generate for $79 per year. It was on all residential and commercial properties. It was $3 million. So $79 per parcel per year. It's $3 million. For $109 per year per parcel, it's $4.1 million annually. So it's really, in terms of the amount of revenue generated for the effort it would take to pass that kind of a tax measure, it does not generate that much. So I think, and then if we limit it even more to the, foreign owned properties, I think you're even, is it even worth?
Yeah, that would, the one that I am looking at, though, that I think, one of our, one of our real needs is, as I think Aisha said, infrastructure, and particularly some new facilities I know it's not popular, but we know that we need to do something about that police building, and it's long overdue that we address that. And I would look at doing something within the next, maybe toward the end of this decade, just as we went back to the voters and asked that the utility user tax be extended, a few years before it was going to expire, we could consider doing that at some time in the next, few years with Measure C, and extending that sales tax half cent, which might then help us finance the new facilities that we need. And I guess keep the parcel tax, but I don't feel that it's the right time to do it with the tax burdens that are on owners of new homes in this city that are all being sold for a huge amount of money. And then in some cases, like the added, it's amazing to me that people buy houses in a geologic hazard abatement district where not only do they have the tax burden, but they have that extra burden. But people are doing it. But I think there may be a point of, the polling it said a lot about the willingness of people to step up. But when we talk about the homelessness and social services, though, a part of me is like the county needs to step up in that area. We all know the battles we've been having, our city manager and I know the battles we've been having with the county on those issues. And not that I don't want us to do the things and have the money to continue the things that we are doing, and I'm very supportive of those things, but the political bandwidth, this is there are a lot, we're going to have a pretty different looking council, judging from where things are right now in the election process. And I just don't think I think we need to take a pause. We've done it every election year since 2014. And, we're still coming out of the pandemic. We don't know what's happening with the economy, really, as we said, as I was noting in the, inflation is sort of rearing its ugly head. And I'm just not sure that by November, we don't know where we'll be exactly on a lot of those fronts in November. And I think it would be a risk, and I wouldn't want to break our great winning streak that we have. But so I think that means that the budget committee I don't even know that we have to have a formal vote or motion on this, but you're hearing that we are not enthusiastic about moving this forward at this time. Are you planning to bring anything, any kind of discussion to the whole council? No. Okay.
No.
All right. Anything else anyone wants to add at this point? Seeing nothing, we'll move on to much easier things to talk about. The next one is the proposed Saturday budget work session.
Yeah, and I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful Deputy Director of Finance, Nicole Gonzalez. She's going to present this item.
Good evening. I have a brief presentation. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you all see that?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. I know that Director Clausen spent some time last committee meeting kind of going over our budget process and where we're at, so this should be rather quickly. And so I just want to give you kind of a visualization of our annual budget process, which I'm sure all three of you are very familiar with, but it starts with departments preparing proposals for both finance and public works as it relates to CIP. Make those recommendations from finance to the city manager, who then meets with each department to kind of go over requests and provide feedback on any support. You'll see there's that city manager deliberation. And so that's when the city manager takes a look at all the requests and how that will impact the bottom line. And currently where we're at is where we are compiling that rather large budget document. So we're in the process of compiling that now, and we're on schedule to deliver that to council and post to the city's website on Wednesday, April 27th. So next Wednesday, we're on schedule to post and print both the document for you. So kind of the next steps once the budget document is delivered and made public, we have our Saturday work session on Saturday, May 14th. So that is the official work session number one for the operating budget. Right now it's currently scheduled as a virtual work session. And then the next slide will kind of take some time to go over the schedule a little bit. Then we always have a second follow-up operating budget work session, which is usually held on a regular council meeting. It does coincide this year with the CIP budget work session number one. And then we are scheduled for public hearing and adoption of the 23 operating budget and CIP budget on June 7th. So this is rather small, so I'm happy to bring up the other a PDF of this. This is a very tentative schedule. It's a work in progress. We're still kind of working out the schedule and where different departments will lie within this presentation for the day. What has been added to this is that we will have a specific time to talk about the public safety workshop projects and provide kind of an update on and budgetary needs for fiscal year 2023. So that has been added to the schedule and varies from what you received as part of the staff report. You will receive a more more concrete agenda with the agenda packet ahead of the Saturday work session. But as the day progresses, things kind of move around. So it's always kind of in a tentative state. So, but it will be a much more finalized version. So with that, I'm happy to open up any questions. Again, all three of you have been through the budget Saturday work session. That will be very similar to how it runs in previous years, where each department head will get up and provide kind of an overview of their fiscal year 23 requests and any potential changes, and then have some time to highlight.
Oh, I think we may have lost Nicole. You're back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You're freezing up. You're frozen again.
Apparently have a bad connection. I apologize. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, I turned my camera off. I apologize. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the actual day of the Saturday work session, or if you have any questions about any of the information that's provided in the staff report.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Sarah? Yeah, Sarah does.
Just a quick comment that I really appreciated that there was, when I looked at this, I was looking for, okay, is there enough time for the departments that always take longer? Is there sort of buffer room if they then run longer? And so I see some of that in here, like having the mayor and council last. That's always a thing we can bump easily if need be. That that public safety, I mean, that the police is already bigger, and then it backs up to public safety. So we've got a good chunk of time there, and that city manager, again, could, no offense, Kelly, could be bumped if it had to, because you have to be there all day anyway. You know, those kinds of, I see the intelligence in this design, so to speak, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely.
And Public Works, a lot of that is the CIP, so that's late on the agenda. Now, this is a fully virtual day, right?
Correct.
And the only other question I had was, there was reference to we're going to look at the 5-year plan. And I'm just wondering, whatever became of the 10-year plan? And why are we now only looking at 5?
So we certainly will continue to present council with, what we know as the model, which shows 10 years out. It will be similar to what we've done in the past. What we, presenting the sort of gigantic spreadsheet that, once we get out in years 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is, kind of guesswork. But we can really focus on the next 5 years. And so what we've shown council over the last few years is sort of the 5-year snapshot. And we'll continue to do that, but also still look at the model and use that as a projection tool for, years further out.
Okay. That was the only question I had. Other than the way of delivery, and I was just trying to look to see if I know that I got the CIP budget online rather than the actual budget book last year. I think I might have. I don't remember if I actually looked at the overall budget as in an online form, or whether I can't remember. But if are you gonna? I know you did a nice little tutorial about the CIP. Are you gonna?
So last year we provided fully online, fully digital, I should say, version of the budget. And it was in a similar tool to what we'd used before. It was essentially a PDF document, where we can sort of bookmark things and allow jumping around, easy navigation, that sort of thing. We will certainly be doing that as we did last year, and I guess is available, sort of has been available in other years. I believe you should have received an email from Chris in the city manager's office to essentially poll council members to see if they'd like to opt to receive a hard copy of a proposed budget. And certainly if any council members wish to receive the big binder, we will certainly provide one.
Did you have the regular budget in a online format last year too?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. And but people could get it the other way if they wanted.
We didn't deliver it all last year because of COVID.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, I remember now. So I did see, I do remember I had a little trouble with the CIP navigating around. So I'd appreciate another little session, brief session maybe on that or some nice written, directions or something on the CIP, because it was really cool when, you got it, but it's been a year. And I do get frustrated when I can't do what I want and things like that. So it would be helpful to provide those some kind of a tutorial or, again, to navigate around, especially that CIP was,
I'll provide that feedback to Dr. O'Malley.
Had some interesting tools. Okay. Anybody else? All right. We could move on to our agenda planning calendar.
And I can throw that up if you would like me to. It is getting shorter as the fiscal year comes to a close here. But let me pull this up real quick. There we go. Sorry. It wasn't what I expected it to be called. So, obviously we've got today's agenda. We'll have a big meeting next month where we will go over the annual review of city issued debt, as well as the unfunded liabilities and benefit liabilities. And then also have a robust conversation around Measure C, which we were, sort of just referring to, looking at, what we've done so far and then, potential uses of those funds moving forward and how we want to program that. So. And then, June, we will all have budget hangover by that point. So we will debrief on that. If we can muster much more, we may put something else, or if there's something else that the committee would like to hear about, then certainly could likely have an update on the community foundation at that point. And then we'll probably also present the potential for future agenda items or a proposed agenda for the next fiscal year around that time. Happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Any questions or comments from committee members? So are you sure you're still there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just couldn't find your name. Okay. On May 18th, last night, I always forget that we don't actually talk about information items for some reason. And I'm sorry if I put you on the spot about a report, but I do think that basically what it was that we probably do want to take that step of, putting together what the bond, whatever you called it. But so is that what that discussion will be about on your plan on the May 18th meeting?
It's not, but we could certainly add it. I mean, I guess what I would say is here's what I would suggest, and you can edit as you see fit. Sort of putting together a clear sort of a timeline of next steps and what it could look like. And then the committee can review that and say, okay, yes, let's explore this. Let's take this back to council. You guys make a motion that we bring the information to council for discussion and consideration as to whether or not to actually execute on the next steps.
Okay, thanks. And I see Sarah has her hand up now.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, I may have missed a little bit of what you said. That process you described, that would happen when there was more information, not in the May meeting, or did you? Sorry, I missed a little bit.
No. So there isn't a lot more information to be sort of provided.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
What I was recommending is we bring a very sort of simple but clear and complete as possible sort of timeline or example timeline of what it could look like when we initiate, step one, which would be, going through the legal process to have it recognized as a legal debt obligation, and then sort of the next steps after that and what that could, the form that could take. I don't know that I would recommend that we do anything other than that at this point, given, and when I say other than that, I mean begin the legal process. Unless we see interest rates stabilize or we see a huge drop in them, I'm willing to, but, with interest rates where they're at today, the amount in savings that we would likely capture is not, I would say the risk isn't worth the reward at this point. But I would like to position us so that when the risk becomes, or when the reward comes worth the risk, we can execute as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I definitely fully support moving forward. And so if we need an unscheduled agenda item just as a placeholder for whenever you need action on that,
I think we can add that to next month, next month's meeting. It won't take but 5 minutes, I would imagine.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm thinking, like, basically, it sounded like council was like, yeah, go ahead, whatever, and let us know when you need an actual decision. So
Yeah.
if there's something that needs to come back to committee, great. Either schedule or put it under unscheduled, or just do that and then bring it to council if they need to make it,
Sure.
full body. But yeah, I think I'm glad you brought it up, Mayor, because I think and I'm with you, Dustin, like, get us ready. And also, while the savings may not be huge, eventually, the idea of being able to stabilize our debt and not be as subject to the volatility of CalPERS, I would think, is also worth positioning or at least exploring. Maybe I'm not thinking about that right.
There's value in that, I think, is, the reality, even if it's not, even if the savings doesn't necessarily, but if we know for sure this is our payment, there's some serious value in that.
That's okay. That's what I was wondering.
Removes volatility and it allows for us to project much easier than, we'll just pay whatever CalPERS tells us next year.
Right.
And then the only other one I had was the TOT, again, as an unscheduled item, but just as we start to think about, not this year for sure, but whoever's on the committee next year, may want to, towards the second half of next year, start to look at, is it time
Potential
to exercise our option to increase?
Adjust.
Yeah. And I appreciated your comment, Barbara, about early renewal of Measure C at some point. Again, I agree that's not this committee's group, but
no, but that should stay on staff radar for the next, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, Aisha. Oh, were you done?
Yeah. I didn't have anything as stated earlier.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's right. You did. Okay. So I still want to see the community foundation somewhere on that. And sorry about that. Hang it. From Hayward, PA.
Also,
anybody knows Spam Hayward? And then I was having a discussion with the city attorney, and I don't think it should be any surprise to anybody, but he will be sadly informing us of a projected, I don't know if he mentioned this already to the whole council, but it looks like our insurance rates are going up. He's talked about it before, and it's not really Hayward's experience or anything about Hayward that is causing this. It's the general tone of and he's said this, I know he said this before to council, the police cases, and I see you have your hand up now, Aisha, but the police cases and the cybersecurity, I think, were two of the biggest ones. In general, things like natural disasters, although Hayward isn't quite as well. I mean, we have the potential of earthquake, but and anyway, so we're going to see a hefty increase in the city attorney's budget due to increased insurance rates. And I think that, and the city attorney is, has talked about some potential alternatives for us. I mean, he's not making any radical recommendations right now, but I think it might be something that at some point later in the year, the budget committee might want to take a look at. I don't know. Do you think that's an appropriate? I mean, it certainly has to do with city budget and finances in terms of how much are we, paying to be insured, and what are some potential different ways we might be able to do that or look at that. So is that something you could see would come to this committee before it would, maybe go with a recommendation to a full council?
I mean, personally, and I look to Kelly here a bit, but I'm not sure that there's a more appropriate committee that it could go to. Just running through the committees in my head, and I don't know that there's a great one that sort of fits it more than this one would. So I think that would be appropriate.
Okay. And like I said, not immediate or, in terms of this budget that we're dealing with right now, probably, but just in the long term, do we want to look at potentially doing things a little bit differently? Okay. Aisha?
Yeah. I did want to just highlight that I think some of the things that I've mentioned in the past, obviously, are we also live in a flood zone. And so that may be potentially a concern. And overall, I just wanted to talk about the fires. When we provide our firefighters to fight a fire in some other county, oftentimes almost every year, we receive more funds from the government coming into us because of their hours served, the firefighters there. What do we do with the amount of funds that we get? Because it's more than what they get. It's not dollar for dollar. It's almost like more. So where do we spend that money? How is it tracked? How is it highlighted?
The most, obviously it's reimbursement, but there's, I believe it's $1.20 for every dollar spent, or every dollar that's reimbursed. There may be dollars that they don't reimburse. It's set that way so that we replenish the supplies that are used while we're off fighting mutual aid. Any wear and tear on the vehicles that are sent out with the mutual aid that goes on. That's I believe state and county mutual aid. If there's something else in other areas, it kind of the rate depends.
Where do we actually earmark it for that, or do we just put it in the general fund?
This is back into the fire department budget, right?
The CIP budget usually goes into their equipment replacement budget.
Correct.
Earmark it for equipment replacement for the fire department specifically in the CIP.
Okay. And is this the same for police?
We don't usually send police.
Not a ton of that goes out of county or out of state.
Yeah, it's rare that our police, and we've even stopped responding to some mutual aid incidents in the region as well, depending on the incident. So,
okay.
Well, we can't not respond to mutual aid, but there's different levels, and there's they ask for sort of volunteer assistance from other agencies. If it's an actual mutual aid request, we cannot deny the request to go to another agency, but we can turn it down if it's just like, hey, we could use some backup. But yeah,
okay, I was just personally, I was just more interested in making sure that funds, if we are, let's say, putting it into our general funds, that we are able to, prioritize it for unfunded liabilities or something to that effect. But I guess replacement of, let's say, hardware is as important. So thank you.
Okay. Sarah?
Thank you. Sorry, I did have a couple other upcoming agenda items that I think we've mentioned, but I'm not sure they got on the list. One was getting an update on the 238 monies. We talked about that last night.
We said we would do that at some point, so we'll figure out when. I think we said we'd be closer to when we close escrow on that parcel, but we can put it on the unscheduled items.
Right.
Yep.
And then the other one is just to keep Public Bank on there. I know it's not going to come back to us soon, but just so that we have it as a placeholder.
Yeah, it should be on the list.
Thanks.
Okay. Is there anything else on that? Is there anything else on anything from any committee members or staff members? And not seeing hands going up, going once, going twice. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good dinner, everyone.
Have a great meeting.
That barking dog. Be sure that